Hi, welcome to Three Fish on the Shirt, episode 7. I'm flying solo this week because Steve is on his holidays. Please don't forget to follow Three Fish on the Shirt on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts from. Please also like and subscribe to the channel and the podcasts. It helps us immensely. Feel free also to get involved at any time. We're more than happy to hear from you, whether you agree with us or not on anything we say on town. All we ask is that you disagree respectfully, and we'll be happy to tell you that you're wrong. Never mind that. But this week, as I say, Steve's on his holidays for a week, so we're missing him. But we've got a great guest in to sit in with us today to look back on town's recent past history at Brighton. We've got none other than Alan Wares, who is certainly has a kinship with town fans, not least because he's married to a Meggie. For those of you tuning in who don't know what that is, that's somebody from Cleethorpes. He's also been following his club Brighton and Hove Albion for many years, through thick and thin, and some very thin times as Brighton were threatened with non-league and possible extinction. So Alan knows all about how clubs struggle to survive at times, and so we talk about that. Our cup quarter final, Alan's own visits to Grimsby to watch his team, and as a neutral with us, and we talk generally about football and our teams. So it should be a great episode. I want to quickly touch on Saturday's game, and then we'll get into the interesting stuff around a town's past with our guest from Brighton. So moving quickly on, great win on Saturday against Brighton. I say great in respect of it was great to get 3 points. It was definitely an attritional game as Town beat Bromley 1-0 on the 125th year anniversary celebrations at Bromley Park. A scruffy win against a team that hadn't failed to score on any of the previous outings, and it's our first clean sheet, so that was a real positive. Also, a penalty for Town, which we've seen some shockers not given. So for us first to get a penalty, so the power of the pod for shouting that out and saying the bar for a penalty was too high. Well, we've through that now, and a win that puts Town in the top half of the table for the first time this season, in 12th place. So 9 points and just scraping into the top half of the table, a place we'd much love them to be compared to where we were at the end of last year in 21st, and indeed last week. It just shows the value of the table at this early stage of the season. It's still a little bit early, but 9 points on the board. 3 or 4 points away from the playoff places. A bit early for that, but nonetheless a nicer place to be for the first time in a while. So on the downside, Kieran Green saw a red card after a second yellow late on in the game, and Town, after scoring the penalty through Danny Rose after a great run into the box by Kieran Green, put Town in front. But after that, rather than the game opening up and Town becoming in the ascendancy and relying on space being made by Bromley pushing forward, Town retreated a bit into themselves and ended up under pressure for the last part of the game, where they lived rather dangerously. I think it certainly would have been unjust if Town had conceded a goal to draw or even lose the game. And I think in past years we probably or possibly would have capitulated at some point in that game. But certainly David Artell's team look resolute and are prepared to put their bodies on the line to get the points, and not something that was not lost on BBC Humberside's Gary Croft, the former Mariner, pointing this out, that people were prepared to put the bodies on the line. And I wonder if that was a bit that was missing last week. Were they the non-negotiables that David Artell was talking about? So we look at the game. Definite penalty in my view. Bit of a foul on the edge of the box. Referee let play go on. Green ran into the box at an angle and was bundled to the ground by the defender. I don't think anybody, even the Bromley defenders, had to complain about the penalty being given. And Danny Rose, having looked at the goalkeeper's record and penalties, was prepared to wait to see what he was going to do before slotting into the goalkeeper's left. Goalie did stand as he was predicted to, and Danny Rose got the goal. After that, it was pretty attritional. It looked like Bromley had come to get a draw from the early stages. They were wasting time for about 15-20 minutes, and it seemed that in that respect they were looking for at least to keep a clean sheet and get a draw. So when Town went in front, it certainly looked as though that might help with creating space for us. But when, as I said, we retracted, and it was very attritional at the end, as I say. Green, as I say, sent off for a second bookable offence, which in the first half there looked to be a couple of similar fouls to the one that Green was originally booked for that went unpunished. So he could feel hard done to in that respect. But had the bookings been consistent, he probably would have gone for a second yellow in any case. But others, as I say, went unpunished. It was nice to also get a win over Andy Woodman, who doesn't like the club, and having said it openly on BT Sport in previous years.
Is it fair to say there's no love lost between you guys and Grimsby after a few comments that were made after the last game?
Yeah, 100%. I don't like them. I don't like the comments they made about my team. I don't like the comments they made about when we won at our place. So yeah, I'm not going to sit here and candy floss it.
Grimsby fans taunting him in terms of beating him. And I think we also think he's very much still bitter about Kevin Donovan rounding him in the 1998 playoff final for Grimsby to beat Northampton 1-0. We don't think he's really got over it. And David Artell was asked about that after the game, and suggested there was no problem with him, but certainly Town fans have had some banter with him on social media over the years. So with that particular match out the way, to say 3 points, top half of the table, a good bit of positivity to build on. It'd be nice now to go and get back-to-back wins and take it forward from here. So in terms of the next game, we've obviously got to play next week away at Carlisle and then Gillingham, so 2 long away days, and then we're back at home against Bradford the week after. So there's tough games every week in this league, and with the league where everybody can beat everybody potentially on the day, it's going to be a tough, long old season, methinks. In other interesting news, we have a look around the grounds to see where ex-Mariners have done any good or bad, as it were. And in this case, we had a bit of a negative one this week with Harry Clifton of this former parish, or formerly of this parish, sent off after 10 minutes for Doncaster at Milton Keynes Dons. Booked after 3 minutes, sent off after 10. So a bad start for Harry Clifton's afternoon in League Two at MK Dons for Doncaster. And in the National League, Arabin Peppel, formerly a loanee from Luton, scored twice for Southend, and Erico Souza, rare goal scorer in his time at Town, managed to score for Boreham Wood. So on that note, we'll move on from the Bromley game and bring in our guest, Alan Wares. Well, welcome back to Three Fish on the Shirt, the newest Grimsby podcast. Find us at YouTube and where you get your podcasts. I'm Dave Dixon, and I'm joined tonight by Brighton's brightest broadcaster and Radio Reverb and Albion Raw's podcasts, Alan Wares. Welcome, Alan.
Have you got your own teeth in tonight, Dave?
Yeah, as always. Yeah.
Yeah, good to see you, mate. Good to see you.
And you.
I'm just going to tell your listener now, as to, of all things, how arbitrary it is, and I'm probably completely going through the middle of your intro notes here, that Dave came down to Brighton for the FA Cup game. And it was still last year, came down and stayed with us because how come that happened, Dave?
Because Grimsby Town got to the FA Cup quarter-final for the first time in 84 years.
And what did you do about your tickets? You cocked it up, didn't you?
I sort of. My erstwhile presenter, colleague, co-host of this podcast, cocked up, and because he went for tickets for the Southampton game, quite easily and comfortably got one of the 4,000. Thought it would be just as easy to get them for the Brighton game, which was at weekend. and I was 2,000 miles away in Gran Canaria, and he said he'd get the tickets, and he said he went to get them afterwards and didn't get them. So he was way too late getting them, and
I love the way you've just thrown him under the trawler.
oh no, he's definitely in. He's definitely in the net. Um, so I ended up paying 200 quid on a hospitality ticket.
Yeah, but at least you didn't have
Just
to pay for a hotel.
There is that. You saved me a fortune on the hotel, but it was great to spend time here, and we had a fabulous weekend, despite the result. And
Well, I've got to kick off. I know we're going to talk about all things Albion and Grimsby, but I do have to kick off and say that, I mean, obviously we've been in that stadium now for what, 12, 13 years. And I've got to say that Grimsby Town fans were probably amongst the best we've ever had as visitors down there. We've filled that end up before. And of course, with the FA Cup, you get more into the away end than you do for a league game. In fact, the round before, we'd beaten Liverpool. And they filled that end. But, there was kind of that sort of Premier League expectation, big six club expectation. Grimsby Town, all right, you'd done a number on Southampton and you made such a racket. I remember watching that game on the telly. But when it came to you guys being down at the away end of the Amex, yeah, you did exactly what away fans should do, which was be respectful of their hosts, have a good time in the city, go into the stadium, sing their asses off for their lads, and even though it was 5-0, carried on singing way beyond extra time, and even joined in the Brighton party noise afterwards. That's what it's all about. And then we had a few beers with lots of Grimsby fans in town afterwards. What a weekend! What a day! Loved it.
Yeah, it was a special time, and the occasion wasn't lost on us. We thoroughly enjoyed our day out, and I don't think I've ever seen an away end so kicking after being stuffed 5-0. To be honest, and that was a sight to behold. So no, it was.
Yeah, seeing that footage. I mean, because obviously I'm looking down from the big stand that was on your left, so I've got quite that panoramic view. And even when they're sort of playing out Free From Desire, and the entire way end is going loopy, with it's interesting seeing 4,000 people having a boogie, and about half of them have got inflatable haddocks.
Yeah.
It's pretty surreal.
And even though you or Susie sponsored my inflatable haddock, because I couldn't get one,
Yeah,
I was relieved of it by a nice lady from Brighton who swapped it for an inflatable seagull after the match, which I think
we're
is like
kinky that way.
the fans equivalent of shirt swapping at the end of the game.
It was, yeah, inflatable swapping. Yeah,
Yeah. So that was
I
an
bet you got a
interesting
number as
take.
well, didn't you?
She was a bit old for me. I'm not Wayne Rooney. Ouch. Anyway, no, I mean the thing that we also enjoyed about Brighton is, and I think it's interesting about particularly where the stadium is located, that it's been created specifically for fans to enjoy the occasion, regardless of when the match is. And I know they've worked hard on making it a positive experience for away fans there, haven't they?
Yeah, I mean, when the stadium first opened, we had this great idea, and it did work for a bit of having the beer from the location of where the away end is, and I can imagine that Doc's beer would have actually cleaned up on the back of that. Yeah, it lasted for about a year to maybe 2 years. I think the first season we were there, we had your good friends from Wrexham down, and the caterers didn't quite get it right. They the Wrexham fans sang about Wrexham lager, feed me till I drink no more. But they ended up getting Brains lager in, which is, I'm sorry to say, is from Cardiff. And they just thought, well, it's Welsh, it's close enough. And you think, well, you've got to try a little bit harder. But yeah, they did actually do it where when Middlesbrough came down, they had to go at making Parmos.
All right.
They weren't anything like as authentic, but I think we had messages from Middlesbrough fans saying, "Hey, at least they gave it a go." That's kind of pretty cool. So yeah, we gave it a go, but the upshot of it is that now the nature of that particular stadium is, because once it's not in the middle of nowhere, it is next to a motorway, it is next to a railway station, it's next to two universities.
It's on the edge of the South Downs.
And it's on the edge of the South Downs, so it's on the edge of what we call the built environment, and there is a village. You probably didn't realise there is a village actually next to it,
Yeah, there is.
and there's a pub there. But in the great scheme of things, as we've been told several times, because of the fact that Harvey's and other real ales are sold there, it is the largest camera-based real outlet in the country, consisting of 29 bars that sell Harveys. So that's a kind of a weird one. But the nature of it is that with the public transport and the way that you get to the ground, people are encouraged to get there early and leave late. If nothing else, if everyone left at the same time, the trains wouldn't be able to cope. So it's just the nature of what we've got there. If we're being stuffed 5-0, people will leave on 75 minutes. So that helps the trains. People will leave on 85 minutes anyway. Or even something like the game yesterday against Nottingham Forest. It was 2-2. People stayed to the end, but it was a nice day, so we stayed and had a few more beers. It's the club actively encourages you to have a drink problem, but which also then helps them, buy a new striker every 2 or 3 seasons or so. So yeah, that's what happened with you. I mean, you came down here, stayed for the game, and then you realise actually all the bars are still open, sort of way beyond time.
So the new financial model is for us to drink loads, so
Yes.
we too can spend 200 million on players in the close season.
Well, the weird thing is that when I went to Blundell Park at Christmas, or last Christmas, with you, and I'll tell you that story as to how come I ended up there in a bit, is that I did like and it wasn't a bad day, even though it was December, it wasn't a bad day. I did like the way that you'd filled in those sort of areas to have sort of outside drinking areas and the beers
zone.
that was
our fan zone, yeah.
The fan zone.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I thought it was superb. The beers on offer were very, very good. And I think that football clubs are finally learning that you cannot get away with serving up corporate super piss. It can't happen anymore. The average football fan has a more refined palate than just being spoon fed Carling. I mean, I'm sorry, anyone that drinks Carling or Foster's that's listening to, I'm sorry, in a way that I'm really not. And certainly us lot down our way just won't put up with that. So even when we had it and the stadium was getting ready and we're being built and there were fans meetings with the club, the first thing we said was, well, we want real ale in there. And the club said, well, football fans don't drink real ale. One, we do, but two, the reason you don't drink it at the stadiums is because it's never on offer. You always go for the lowest common denominator. We want something a bit, we spent 14 years homeless, at least feed us a little bit. And I think that other clubs have caught on. And, Grimsby Town have done exactly the same. They're serving their local beers. They're doing it in a manner that people can be convivial. And yeah, you can see the route on which Grimsby are now on of looking after their fans properly. And treating with them, by the looks of things, with a little bit more courtesy and respect.
I think that's certainly true, and I think it's in support of the community. So, local food outlets, local
Absolutely
beers, Doctor Beers. I know you've had some delivered down south, haven't you? When you've had people come down,
I've had some Doc's beers down here. I keep telling my mate Attila, the stockbroker, who's a performance poet, to go up there and actually do a gig up in the Doc's beers performance area, because I think he'll love it. I mean, he's a massive real ale drinker anyway. I think he's probably got a decent following up there. He said he's played Cleethorpes a few times. I said, look, just get your ass in there. I think well, let's put it this way, you'll get in there. You won't want to leave because they're just going to sort of IV, some of their clap fish beer straight into your eyeballs and not let you come round for 3 days.
Interestingly, the same performance poet that managed to wangle Cleethorpes and Grimsby linked into his special performance for your wedding.
Yes, and the reason that Dave, for the benefit of your listener, the reason that Dave and I have met each other is that well, my now wife is from Cleethorpes. She is a Meggie, and I think, is it you went to school together or a year apart, or is it?
No, we went to school together in the same year.
Went to school together at Tolbar.
Correct. Yeah,
in Waltham.
Correct.
Yeah, and and I think you sent a message saying this is for the footy, saying help. I can't get a ticket because my mate has just dogged me out. So yeah, we caught up together, and yes, my good mate Attila. Well, I do his design work, his T-shirts and his album covers and things like that, and he calls me his minister of propaganda. Yes, he wrote a poem especially for us, and I did point out, because he has this kind of toilet humour, that I said, by the way, a native of Cleethorpes is called a Meggie. His eyes lit up like Christmas trees.
He only had one word
Um,
for you then, didn't he?
he only had one word. Well, he could have used Peggy, because I actually ended up entitling the poem Meggie Sue Got Married.
Right.
But yeah, he wrote a kind of actually, it was fairly clean for him.
Yeah.
Poem, but yes, that was good. I can see John. I can see Attila doing a gig at Docks. I say I've made a point of swanning in there, and I haven't had a beer in there because I kind of feeling it's a place that if you're not in the city centre anyway, if you're not in the town centre anyway, you kind of have to drive to it. And I still, for the number of times I've been around Grimsby, I still get lost quite easily. And if you directed me from Waltham to Docks, I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So you get the feeling it's somewhere you have to drive to, and
Yeah.
I know that people listening to this say, no, you don't need to do that at all. Well, I do, because I'm useless.
So that means you need somebody to take you. That's what you're asking for.
Basically, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
I'm sure, given the hospitality you showed me, next time you're up, we can manage that somewhere along the line. But it's
Absolutely.
interesting, the link up with Doc Spears is very much in keeping with that kind of local link, and the club, the trajectory that Jason and Andrew have got the club on, and probably since you last heard, I don't know if you picked up, Jason and Andrew have actually swapped roles. So Andrew's now the chairman, and Jason's gone to vice.
But
that's not the local.
You've got a chair of vice, haven't you?
Not the local police unit.
Not the. I didn't think Grimsby has a red light district. It doesn't even have a red snapper district, does it?
It certainly does.
So, what does that mean in terms of them running the club?
A very little difference. It's just, I think Andrew's doing a bit more of the fronting up now in terms of, speaking about what the trajectory is, where the club's at, and all the rest of it. So yeah.
Sorry, Dave. Did you I know this is your podcast and your listeners will know the answers already, but do they come across representing a united front? I mean, are they the kind of people that you want running your club?
In my opinion, absolutely yes.
Yeah.
It's a struggle to drive success on the pitch, in line with what's going on off the pitch. But that's always going to be the case for us in the situation we're in at the moment. It's not easy to attract players. The budget's not massive, but Jason and Andrew want the club on a sustainable footing, and not prepared to break the bank to all costs. But what they have done is they've invested heavily in the infrastructure, the ground. I mean, the ground's looking really smart now. It's old. Some of that ground. It was the 125th anniversary this last weekend was the celebration, and for one of the oldest grounds going, it's in very decent nick now.
It is actually,
compared to what it has been, and that leads us nicely into talking about owners that probably didn't have the club's best interests at heart.
How much am I allowed to swear?
You can swear a bit. It's fine.
Okay, I'll try not to.
But we both know, we've had issues with owners in the past, and I think one of the things that I hadn't realised why Brighton fans sympathise with our plight, having just come back out the National League when we met you, was the fact that you've been in the shit basically a number of years ago, and and therefore sympathise with the plight of smaller clubs, which has been very noticeable over the last few years with Brighton fans.
Well, for anyone under the age of 40, and certainly those who didn't follow our story, let's rewind to 1993. And some of the members of the board of Brighton and Hove Albion had an EGM, an extraordinary general meeting, as opposed to an annual general meeting. It's kind of an emergency general meeting. And they did something like change the Articles of Association. The Articles of Association are a set of rules that every club must have if they wish to be associated and members of, in this instance, the Football League. Now, the club or the board, some board members arbitrarily changed the notices of that. This is something that didn't come to light for about another 3 or 4 years. But one of those things that happened was the Article Association, or this one particular clause, said that if the club should ever be wound up, Well, the previous clause stated any monies left over after all debts are paid off will be spread across various sporting clubs across Sussex. This clause was arbitrarily removed, which, if had been known, would have set the hairs running. So anyway, July 1995, it's not announced, it's leaked that the Goldstone ground has been sold. It's been our ground since 1902. And we were going to be playing at Portsmouth. Oh no, you're not, said Portsmouth. We've had this conversation with you, and we've already told you no. Sod off. Okay. Next day, the paper runs a story saying, by the way, the ideas for the new ground that you want to have, we've already rejected. So all this stuff that you're saying that we're going to put you in, and it's a different site to where we are now. You're not moving there. So basically, everything that's been leaked, the club is then had to deny, because they've been told, they said, we're going to Portsmouth. No, we're not. We're going to move to this stadium on the outskirts of town. No, you're not. And people started demanding answers, and they weren't forthcoming. And after a while, the board of directors started getting snotty and abusive, banning people arbitrarily, which is probably not a huge sort of problem. In this time on the pitch, we went down from the 3rd to the 4th division. No one barely noticed. And things came to a head at the end of the 1996 season, 95-96 season, when it looked like we were going to have our last ever game at the Goldstone and nowhere to play the following season. So there was a pitch invasion. The crossbars got snapped, and it just brought to attention, it had to bring to attention to the nation the plight of our football club. Now, why were we particularly a special case? We weren't, but we were being sold down the river. This was someone actively trying to. It's not even someone being useless. This was actually sort of deliberate, trying to close the club down. The chairman did actually say, well, if I close the club, no one's going to notice. And this was a club that had been in the FA Cup final only sort of 13 years earlier.
So somebody had to say, oh, do you think so?
Yeah. So eventually, the thing is, for all the protesting we're doing, it was absolutely no use until such time as we realised that someone's there to take over. Yes, we can get rid of this current board. If we've got no one else to step in, then you're in the same boat. Step forward this chap, Dick Knight, who had been brought in. If we really want to talk about the fella who started our crusade back to the land of the living, you want to look at the former Arsenal and Republic of Ireland international, Liam Brady. He was the one that got the consortium together, included this chap, Dick Knight, and another fellow called Martin Perry.
What was Liam Brady's links to the club?
Well, one, he'd been the Albion manager for a short time. He got sacked by this particular regime, but he stuck around. He lived in Hove for a bit. I think he still does, actually. Still lives in this neck of the woods. That's what happens when someone plays for this club, and they move down here and come and live somewhere. They tend to stick around, especially those that were from London. Think, sod this, I like it. I'm not going back to bloody London.
It sometimes happens here as well. Or you might say surprising to outsiders, but you know how nice.
No, I mean
the
Lincolnshire
nice
countryside is amazing.
Yeah.
No, the Lincolnshire countryside is amazing.
So
the
same thing
yeah, exactly. So we get a stay of execution, but in the following year, it's nothing but protests. I mean, the atmosphere is toxic. The directors, in their wisdom, still decide they want to come along. They're getting abuse thrown at them. There's one of the directors, a fellow called David Bellotti. He brought his 18-year-old son, or his son, along for his 18th birthday, and then you had 6,000 people shouting Bellotti as a wanker at his dad. I think that's a really nice way for you to celebrate your son's 18th birthday. Yeah. We had all sorts of protests. We had walkouts. We had whistle protests. We had marches. We marched in London. We marched through the city. We had Fans United Day. Now, what an amazing day that was. A Plymouth fan said, I think that what's happening here is disgusting. I think it'd be a really good idea if fans of all clubs come along in their home shirts one particular match and show their support. Now, what an idea. What a brilliant idea.
Now, have you not paid that forward as well with other clubs since?
We have. I'll come to that in a second, because I've just started on the first 2 years and I've got another 22 to go. No, and it all culminated in, and in this time we're now sort of, 8, 9, 10. I think we were at one point 11 points adrift at the bottom of the table, having had 2 points deducted after another pitch invasion at home to Lincoln City. And yeah, we at Christmas, 1996, we were 11 points adrift at the bottom of the table. Slowly but surely, with Steve Gritt, the new manager, the former Charlton player, came in, clawed our way back up, and until we had a fighting chance on the last day of the season, away at Hereford United, who incidentally were the team that we'd just overtaken on the second to last week of the season. So it was a kind of a kill or be killed. Thing with Hereford, if they'd have gone down, they could have come straight back up. If we'd have gone down, because even at that time we had no idea where we were playing,
Disappeared without trace.
we'd have been relegated at least 3 divisions. The conference didn't want to know us, so we'd have had this ludicrous situation of playing in tier 7, 8, something like that.
A bit like Scunthorpe.
Way down, but having been thumped down there rather than sort of falling slowly due to whatever it might be.
Oh, no, they fell fast. Don't worry about that.
Well, if you've ever seen that, was it Whack-A-Rat? That's what would have happened to us if the hammer would have caught the rat.
Yeah.
Anyway, we survived. Spent 2 years at Gillingham, absolutely ridiculous for our home games. Spent then 12 years
at
Withdean.
It's a good trek, that, isn't it?
It is a bit of a trek. I'm trying to work it out. It's probably the equivalent of you playing your home games at somewhere like, I don't know, Notts County.
Wow. Yeah.
Maybe even further. I'm not sure. About 75 miles, give or take.
It's about right. Yeah.
Yeah. 12 years at Withdean. That was a funny place, and that was probably the last time that we played you guys. Was while we were at Withdean. I think about our second or third year at Withdean, and we went down together. So
after
certainly,
a game at Blundell Park, was it not?
Well, there was the game at Blundell Park, which I did go to, but I couldn't for the life of you tell you what the home game was. And I don't know, did you actually make it down to Withdean that season?
No. I've been to the.
Did you ever go to Withdean?
I went to Goldston. That's the only time. Goldston and Farmers are the only ones I've been to.
Oh, right. Now, Withdean was very much open air. You were miles from the pitch. I think someone worked it out that the away end was about 60 yards away from the goal.
A bit like West Ham, then.
Worse,
without
worse, because at least with West Ham they've taken with West Ham they've taken the running track up. But Withdean, and you still had to look through a hammer net as well. Wow. So then it took that long for us to achieve via taking on City Hall, through 2 planning inquiries, 2 public inquiries, 3 legal challenges, including a legal challenge to the Deputy Prime Minister himself.
Who you actually, or fans of Brighton actually visited on a visit to Grimsby, which is featured in Nick Outerside's book, Death in Grimsby, which you introduced me to.
Yes. There's nothing. The death in Grimsby has nothing to do with the sort of like the social mores of Grimsby. It was I think if we played, it was either Grimsby or Hull City we were playing. But yes, his constituency there. We delivered him a 7-foot Valentine's card saying, "Please give us our stadium."
That was the same day that Nick nearly died in Grimsby. That was the story, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
I've reread it. I reread it before you came on.
I still haven't got around to reading it. Don't tell Nick. Listen, we've written 2 books on the subject. There's Build a Bonfire, and then there's We Want Falmer. That have been written about this, and the kind of contemporary accounts of all the things that we did, and it had to be even more imaginative because we were trying to persuade central government to give us our stadium. We had 3 party conferences that we could walk on. Thankfully, being in Brighton, they had the party conferences down here. So there was 2 Labour, 1 Lib Dem ones, because there was the Lib Dems locally who were seriously opposing our stadium, and Labour were the government party at the time. So it was all sort of shouting for John Prescott to give us our stadium.
We had Valentine, John.
Yeah, Valentine, yeah, and the opponents tried to smear him as well. When we had the Lib Dems, someone created this fake menu for their main banquet, full of sort of silly jokes about the fact they're telling. Was it not Cabernet Sauvignon? It was something like the Lewis Cabinet so very wrong. It's things like that.
Yeah.
Really silly jokes that way. What else do we do? Let's say there was Prescott. We made sure we had the banners up when we were at the playoffs in Cardiff. Every opportunity that we had, and to the point that John Prescott, and he'll say this. I'm sure he's probably put in his biography somewhere. He said the friendliest campaign he ever had was Albion fans trying to persuade him to grant approval for the stadium. And he said even in his role as deputy prime minister, he'd be on a business trip, he'd be on a governmental trip to Japan. And this chap walked up and said, "Oh, Mr. Prescott, can I have a quick word? Have you got a second?" He said, "Yeah, sure. What's up?" He said, "What are you doing about the Albion Stadium?" He said, "I'm in Japan. Can I not get a rest from this at all?"
Yeah.
People would come up to him on the train, in the street, because he was that much more of a kind of an open person. He wasn't quite so hiding behind his
Until
entourage.
he
But
got punched.
anytime someone got you, it was still fairly democratic about sort of being,
Yeah.
But anyway, Mr. Prescott, are you going to talk about this Seagull Stadium? Yes, I'll let you know. Can you? Now he got bombarded by it, but all over the world. But he does actually sort of say it with a friendly smile. Anyway, we got into our stadium in 2011, and the rest, as they say, is history. But we probably played you several times, actually, didn't we?
Yeah. And our troubles ran were around the ground. Our erstwhile previous benefactor, Mr. John Fenty, was all for moving us, and I get the impression over time that's probably all he was after, until after about 17 years, things came to a head when he brought in an investor who wanted to invest £1 million for no return, and that particular individual turned out to be a convicted con man who'd con people
Lovely.
to £3.5 million worth of mortgages out of old people in Manchester area. And once
Brilliant.
that blew up, he basically lost trust of everybody at the club.
Yep.
He lost his seat on the council, which was he resigned his seat on the council, and he was also portfolio for property. So it just all left a really nasty taste in the
He
mouth. But
sounds dreamy. He
what-
sounds dreamy.
one of the nice things that happened was he agreed to sell the club pretty sharpish once all that broke. And the strange thing was, at the time we had Ian Holloway in charge, who was going to be a shareholder. It turns out after he left, he never invested. It was all on a promise of when he moved up, he was going to become a shareholder. And his excuse for leaving was he came to work with John Fenty and he didn't want to work with the new people. That was the thing. So judge from that what you can. But I think from that, on that basis, I think we were best rid of all parties on that one.
Well, this is the funny thing, isn't it? I mean, when you sort of think of kind of this old football chairman thing, and we're not necessarily, and certainly since the Premier League has started, because I could actually say about First Division football chairman as well, is very, very few had the best intentions of football at heart to them. They didn't see it as an industry; they saw it as a money-making machine. Fans were there who are nothing but trouble, but were there to. They I think it was almost a kind of a consideration that as a businessman, they don't really think that customers are their best asset. They just see them as people who come in through the doors and to be treated, pretty appallingly.
Especially moany customers like football supporters.
Money who expect maybe occasional effort from players.
Yeah,
And I think that maybe, I don't know if there's a sea change in attitudes towards business generally, but certainly football's finally come to the table in realizing that actually, if you treat people well, the fans will behave well.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, that's probably not an idea that would have happened in the 80s. You probably still had your violence. But when you're going to pen people in and, the coppers are just going to sort of be knocking 7 bells of shit out of you just for the sake of it. If you're going to get treated like shit, you're going to behave like shit.
And the 80s were like that, and Blundell Park was like a zoo with the cages everywhere, like most places.
Well, the Golston was. Yeah, the Golston was. There's ridiculous cages, and you look back on it now, you think, I don't think I'd actually go into that ground now if they'd still had those fences. It's that kind of barbarism.
Yeah,
And as they point out, fans might get onto the pitch. Well, nobody died invading a football pitch.
There's a book in there, isn't there, about barbarism and barbed wire football in the 80s.
Yeah, and like I say, I went to the Goldstone in the 80s, and it wasn't pleasant.
Yeah.
Even when the attendance had slumped from sort of the low 20,000s to sort of like 7,000 and 8,000, and you had plenty of space on the terrace around you, but it was still unpleasant. You still had these mullet-headed casuals who just wanted a fight for the sake of having a fight, and you think, what are you doing here? And I'd have probably been sort of 15, 16, whatever it was at the time. I was just thinking, what are you trying to achieve here?
Yeah.
Every club had to have its firm and see how hard they were, and I just thought they were prats. Still do.
Yeah, and I fully agree with that.
But anyway, that's not me being a moody, knackered old miserable bastard, which I probably have been since I was about 16. But
old before your time, were you?
Oh, easily.
Well,
I had my retirement party at 19.
Nice work if you can get it. I think that was definitely the reason.
But I would say is the last time we played you before that FA Cup match was the same season, and Grimsby won 2-1.
Yes.
Can you remember the goal scorers?
The goal scorers, I've got Phil Jevons. Did he get one?
Yeah.
And is it Isaiah Rankin, the other one?
He did.
Yeah.
He did. Your goalkeeper got a red card in the last minute.
So that would have been Aidan Davison.
Yep.
And I can't remember who scored for you.
Sorry?
Can't remember who scored for you.
I've got Trevor Benjamin here.
18 minutes.
Yeah. Lineup had changed a little bit, but yeah, but we were still more. I think I've got a feeling that I've been our last defeat of the season.
Yeah.
And then we marched on to the playoffs and beat Bristol City in the final.
Excellent. So that covers my visit to the Goldstone. We've already referred to my FA Cup trip to.
Hang on, did we? So we got to the bottom of the fact that your trip to the Goldstone was in '91. Yes.
Yes, it was. Yes.
Aha.
And 8 goals conceded and none scored. So if you want me to ever come to a Brighton game, it looks like I'm your lucky charm. And what about your visits to Bromley Park then? I know about one of them. The other one I won't.
Well, there's obviously that relegation game in 2003 that we were talking about, where both sides went down.
Yeah.
I think Grimsby were already down that day, and we had to rely on Reading beating Stoke, I think it was, and they didn't. And we didn't win anyway.
Always the challenge of relying on others, isn't it?
Yes, but the fact is that the thing is, it was actually quite a miracle that we were in that division at all, because I say we were in with Dean. We couldn't generate any money. There was no other curricular activities that we could do, and money was being hemorrhaged trying to get a new stadium. The main thing that we had really was it's not so much Fatboy Slim bankrolling the club. He didn't, but what we did have was Dick Knight, whose main, I suppose, trick was to encourage people to invest in the club. And when I say invest, it was, as he always liked to call it, an investment of the heart, which basically meant you can give us your money, but there's no way you're getting it back. You're doing this because you love the club, not because there's any financial incentive for you to do so.
And I think that's where we are with Jason and Andrew. They know that it is an investment of the heart, as you put it, and they want like-minded people to come, and that's one of the things that's just happened, which is why I'm keen to get Kieran to come on and talk to us about the recent.
I think Kieran will fairly and squarely put you in the picture. I think you'll be wanting to put that podcast up as soon as you finish with him.
Yeah, and I know from my experience of listening to your podcast, you've had him on, Jason, before the quarterfinal, and I know Kieran's spoken to him in the past as well. So it'd be really interesting to hear what he's got to say.
Yeah, well, I mean, whenever it is you get to speak to Kieran, believe me, he'll have Grimsby Town's number. So
all over it,
and I think he's kind of impressed with Jason Stockwood. So
it'll be interesting to hear, and it's nice of him to come on join our fledgling podcast that we've got.
Absolutely.
Up
No,
and
I
running.
think I'd like to think that it's actually going to be a podcast whereby you're getting as near as damn it as you could ever do. You'll get an honest assessment of where Grimsby Town is at.
Yeah.
I'd be of the opinion it's obviously in a damn sight better position than it was about 3 years ago, but you'll get an honest assessment as to where. And I suspect that probably Jason and Andrew will be of the opinion that they can trust Kieran with the information that any information they can provide him.
Yeah, and in terms of supporting a club that's been in the shit, basically, for want of a better way of putting it,
Yep.
to now being at the upper echelons of the Premier League, that's chalk and cheese. How does that feel? What's that like as an experience?
We are so much enjoying our moment in the sunshine. We have no idea how long it's going to last. So we're making hay. So if we do come across as a bit sort of snotty and smug, do forgive us. We haven't forgotten where we came from, which is why we'd like to think that we gave Grimsby Town such a good day out, apart from 90 minutes of football. And should that kind of thing ever happen to Grimsby Town again, then Brighton fans will be there because. And I will harken back to the 8th of February 1997. Believe me, it's not a date I have to look up. For that Fans United Day, and where fans came from all over the country to support our cause. We always said that the stadium is dedicated to them as well because they were the ones that saw that a wrong needed to be righted. Even after the Undertakers had come in and started measuring the club up, we never gave up. There are certain people within that group, that campaigning group, who since passed away. But there's others who are still about, and we say, look, let's do something for you. And all their attitude is, look, if you seek your monument, look around you. So every time I go to the Amex, even 13 years in, I won't say I have to pinch myself a bit, but I do have that sort of certain sense of smug pride that, I was only a foot soldier. I did more than some, less than others. But I know that I can hold my head high and say that I played my part in getting that stadium. And I'm getting that stadium. That is the catalyst for us being where we're at. I mean, don't get me wrong, just having the stadium in its own right is not the reason we are where we are. We have got a very, very clever and very caring chairman, and a very I'd go so far to say a genius on writing algorithms which for the human psyche, trying to actually ascertain which footballers are those who are going to fit best into the club, and trying to get them for the best money possible. People talk about it being a well-run club. Now, it might be that we can buy cheaply and sell high, but that only comes with everyone, and I mean everyone, facing in the right direction. That means they have to follow Tony Bloom and Paul Barber, the chief executive, in believing in what they're doing. And I think that a football club, rightly or wrongly, is only ever judged on its merits on the pitch. And I'm sure that Jason Stockwood and Andrew Pettit would actually like that to be the case. But I would also go so far as to say is that in between the Grimsby Town I saw on the telly 5-6 years ago, the Grimsby Town I saw, when I visited 20 years ago, versus the Grimsby Town I saw at Christmas. Now, whilst on the pitch, there's a lot that needs to happen. Certainly those around the town and those fans, I would say that you have got as good as you can get for Grimsby Town. And that if anyone, even only 2-3 years in, needs to judge those two, they should judge them very favourably. It's not only about what goes on the pitch, it is about making sure that everyone faces the right direction, that the community is involved, that all stakeholders are considered. And for that, and I think in Stockwood and Pettit, you've got probably the two of the best you can get.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think from a fan's point of view, we've had some crap times over the last 20 years. I mean, in fact, going back to my career as a town fan since 1978, 1979 Championship was probably the pinnacle of league football, followed by the next 40 odd years of some odd bits of peak, but a lot of.
We were promoted in that season as well, actually.
And I think from that respect, these guys are fixing years of sort of general neglect. You know, money spent on a stadium that's probably one of the oldest in the league, just to keep it going. But you can definitely see things are in the right direction, and success will follow. I'm sure for the guys, and
Absolutely.
certainly get my back in, and it's an interesting time for us. But that
Good for them. And like I say, the parallels are there, and that's why I can actually
t-
sort of like look on Grimsby Town with a certain amount of affection.
at 21st in the league with 5,200 season ticket holders, can't be bad. Can't be bad.
Yeah, the
That's-
players need to pull their fingers out of their asses a bit, don't they?
They do at times, but we're getting there. So it's interesting to pick up on all these little sort of links and things that are similar about the clubs, and also about the things that are different. And it's really been great to get you on. On the show.
All I would say, Dave, is that now I appreciate that obviously. Well, Grimsby had a history, sort of certainly before the war, that actually was way better than everyone else's, and obviously since the war, times have been leaner with the occasional sort of flash here and there. But all I'd ever say is that if Brighton could do it, Grimsby can do it.
Yeah.
Because say we were bottom of the fourth division, we didn't even have a ground. We had we had bills we couldn't afford. Now, don't get me wrong, our proximity to London, or our proximity maybe for being a cool city, I don't know, does help. But if the will is there, if the right leadership is there, if the belief in and the dignity and a hope and a desire for a better future for your football club and therefore for the town is there, I'd like to think that Brighton and Hove Albion has proved that it can be done.
Yeah, I think that's true. One other thing I wanted to ask you while we've got you on is, how did you get into the podcast side of thing and the radio? How did that come about?
Well, actually, the radio show that we've got I didn't actually start it. It started on something called Festival Radio. Now, there's the Brighton and Hove Arts Festival, and there was always a temporary radio station that was set up specifically for that. And so for those 4 weeks during May 2003, yes, that bloody month, there was a couple of guys who did that show for those 4 weeks, once a week. The station itself got its license in 2007, and Johnny and Richie had this Albion Raw show. Now, the following year, what had happened was that Guy Butters, he formerly of Spurs and Portsmouth and Gillingham, finished his career at Brighton, and someone came to me and said, "Do you realise he's never had a testimonial?" I said, "Well, okay, fine." But he said, "Well, what Portsmouth fans did for someone else, I can't remember what it was, they hosted I think it was a boxing evening." Now, I hate boxing, so I wasn't going to go do that. But just sort of flip the idea. So in the end, we hired out one of the bigger restaurants in the city, with a view to having an appreciation for him, an appreciation evening for him. And so I asked to see if the guys on the Albion Raw, Johnny and Richie, would plug it. Because they had the same people on. They had the same two presenters and the same two regular guests. And they said, "No, come in and do it." So I did the show with them, and they decided to invite me back. Then I became a regular guest, and then I broke their show's format by inviting people in from the club. In those days, the club was even more democratic and even more open than it is now. To the point that the chairman, I got to hear things from the chairman that I frankly really shouldn't have been hearing. He was quite a wobbly god, but anyway, he was more than happy always to come on the show. And we got so many people in, and eventually Johnny and Richie sort of fell by the by, and AD and I took it over. And so we've had a multitude of studios, including our respective bedrooms. And here we are, 17 years later, still talking shite.
And when the sound quality is as good as this, why would you not be able to do it from home?
It's my cheap microphone, Dave.
It sounds good. Sounds good this end. So since 2008, and the rest is history. So
the rest is a mystery, as they say.
Yeah, and I know you were the one responsible for getting the guests in, and it's fitting in that respect that you're our very first ever guest on our
first
podcast,
interloper
on our little podcast. And exciting as it is, we've got some more guests following up in the next few weeks. We've got an ex-striker of Towns, a guy called Steve Saunders, coming on. He's coming on in the next few weeks. We've got Kieran lined up as well, which was really good, and thank you
Which would be good.
for the introduction on that score.
Well, hopefully on the back of that, then you'll get Jason as well.
Little coup for our little show, and yeah, as I say, we go from strength to strength, hopefully. So,
and good luck to you, mate.
Yeah.
I hope the 3 fish become 4.
Yeah, and thank you for so much for coming on this evening. I think at that point we've had a real good chat, and we'll leave it there. So, Alan Wares, thank you very much for being our first ever guest.
Thank you for inviting me on.
You're very welcome. What a great episode. Thanks for joining me, Alan. Don't forget to like and subscribe the YouTube channel and follow our social media channels, and also to get the podcast on audio wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks again for joining us. It's me, Dave Dixon, signing off for this evening on the podcast. And please come back again and join us when we've got some great guests. We've got Steve Saunders coming up and Kieran Maguire of the Price of Football podcast, which is a great coup for us to get those guys to come on and talk to us about our club. So thanks again for listening. See you in the next one. Cheers.